Cut. Restart. Go.
Welcome to Homebrew Labs, the show full of technical errors and restarts. Hello, Wayfarers, and welcome to another episode of Homebrew Labs, the show where we take random prompts and build brand new homebrew content for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. I am your host, Matthew Fallaize. With me, as always, is our illustrious illustrator, Sarah, and our special guest today, Dr. Josiah Simon. So glad to have you on today, man. We got there in the end, guys. It took 3 attempts, but we got there.
Smoother, but, you know, it's one of those evenings.
It is. Right before we jump into this episode, I would just like to address everyone's attention to the little bar that is right beneath Josiah at the moment, which has 72 written on it. In case you haven't been keeping up to date with our streams and aren't familiar, we are currently trying to reach our first stretch goal on Twitch and gain 100 followers. If we are able to get to 100 followers, we will release a special one-off episode of Homebrew Labs, which we're just super excited to do. I'm not going to give anything away what it's going to be, but if you are currently watching and you are not currently following, make sure to hit that follow button and join us so that you can keep up to date and we can reach that goal and release that excellent content. But enough of that for now. Today, Josiah and I are going to be creating a brand new encounter for 5th edition, built-in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Sarah will be designing the battle map as we go that this is going to play on. So we're going to start by, as always, pulling some prompts out of the wonderful hat of randomness. First thing to select, I think, a good starting point is to kind of work out what type of creature we're going to be dealing with in this encounter, what kind of enemy that our heroes will have to face in this encounter. And so we are going to be facing off against the main enemy of this is going to be an elemental.
Yes.
So that is that could be super fun. That allows for a lot of interesting things. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to be deciding on what sort of level of a party that we will be building this encounter for. So this is going to...
Level is a real double-edged sword.
Super is, but it's an interesting starting point, I feel. It may be completely broken throwing an elemental against some first level characters, though. We will see. So this is a 10th level party. So we're going to be building this encounter for a 10th level party. That's quite good, right down the middle.
We're going to need more elementals.
We're going to need more elementals. That's fine. We could throw as many elementals into this as we possibly could possibly like. And the last thing I wanted to is basically just pick some random element, just some kind of random element that we have to include in this encounter. Something, an additional hazard or challenge that may be presented. And the challenge is that the terrain that our party members will be fighting on is going to be a shifting, moving terrain.
I mean, that's what I was going to say, regardless of what you pulled out of the hat. Are you sure this is random?
It is random. As the hat of randomness is, does not take favors. Wonderful. So,
Chris in the chat is little big yin, and he says, if it's an air elemental, give them the Dyson. Problem solved. Or job done.
Dyson. Wonderful.
I want to just mention really quickly, I've been having some other technical issues with my sound, and if it's echoing, if people in the chat could let me know, because I did some things to change earlier to see if that worked. Because the main problem, I think, is my headset. I'm getting the right one back later. Anyway, on we go.
No, wonderful. Okay, so, Josiah, so let's have a kind of think. Like, we got to work with an elemental. So the standard elementals are all challenge rating of 5. So you could probably throw maybe 3 of them at a party at level 10, and that would be more or less a reasonable thing. But there are actually quite a few creatures that do come under the title of elemental. For example, all of the genies, all genies in 5th edition are technically elementals.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is another thing as well.
I was thinking.
Along with Mordenkainen and Totem of Foes, you've also got things like the Phoenix or the Leviathan, although those are much more hearty creatures.
Yes.
Okay, so what are you thinking?
Yeah, okay. So in terms of game balance, right? First thing that needs to be said about challenge rating is challenge rating within, let's say, within 3 levels is actually informative, right? It actually tells you this is going to be a little bit too difficult, just about right, not quite difficult enough. Those are informative numbers, but 5 plus 5 does not equal 10, right?
It certainly does not.
Does not equal 20. Those challenge ratings do not add together. And there's a lot written about this in terms of like the mass combat systems, where they've actually done simulations of, take 20 or 100 of a challenge rating 2 versus 1 challenge rating 20 and what happens. So those can be useful reference points. But basically, the reason I bring this up is that when we're dealing with a level 10 party, you can start running into cases where someone can whip out a spell that will just totally redefine the encounter. So greater invisibility is on the table at that point.
Indeed,
So you can have a case where you might accidentally end up throwing a creature at them, and they can maintain greater invisibility, and it's just not a contest, right? So you got to kind of keep in mind those things. And the flip side is true. For example, there's actually an encounter, and it's meant to be super deadly at the beginning of, I think it's a level 4 encounter in Storm King's Thunder, where there is an evil air elemental that is straight up invisible, and there's no way that the party has a way of detecting this air elemental, and its entire purpose is just to run around the party and maul them while invisible. And like, it doesn't have a lot of hit points, but it can really do a lot of damage to a party that just doesn't have the capabilities to deal with something that's resistant to non-magical damage, which they can't deal, that, it's attacking them with advantage constantly, and they constantly have disadvantage to even see it or to attack it, even when they're attacking in the right area, which they're often losing attacks entirely. So
absolutely. I mean, balancing is always going to be a tricky thing, especially considering, obviously, this is a very generic statement of a 10th level party where we don't know what classes these players would be playing or anything like that. So I think the best thing to do is kind of just get us a starting point as to, like, what do we want to do with this setting, particularly when now we're considering that the terrain itself is going to be moving. My initial thoughts were either to do a fire-centered thing where it's like in an active volcano and rocks are floating around each other in the lava, or having something like an air elemental focus thing where it's a similar kind of thing but floating around in the air. Those were my kind of thoughts to start off with.
Okay. So I'm just going to give you some real GM advice here.
Sure.
I find that pacing around, getting really excited, listening to like Two Steps from Hell, real like epic fantasy music, and trying to picture like action scenes from movies really helps me a lot.
Definitely.
Stuff like the Earth King from Avatar: The Last Airbender, where they're coming in at the end of season 2, action movie sequences, things like that, really helps me to plan encounters because it gets me thinking about what are the kinds of situations that just lead to cool stuff happening.
Heck yeah.
And if you put some thought into that ahead of time, your players will have a lot of fun because you can just kind of set up rule of cool things ahead of time.
Nice. If we're going full rule of cool, then I definitely think we should set this in a volcano, and like in a giant volcano, and have this on kind of like rocky islands within the magma that are floating around. I get this image in my head, like you saying about films, the kind of final fight sequence in Star Wars Episode 3, which
All these things are
not obviously
was jumping into my brain too, like the lava at the end and
the lava fight sequence between Obi-Wan and Anakin. I think that's what I have in my head, of just that kind of fight going on these floating platforms.
In the chat, there's some chatter about air combat, Wizard of Oz, tornado on top of a dirigible.
Oh yeah.
But I think there's a really cool, like, the uplighting of lava is very cinematic, isn't it?
It's very cinematic, and also adds like that just extra hazard because of the insane amount of damage that lava does in 5th edition. In probably in older editions as well, but lava does such a stupid amount of damage when you fall into it. So having that as an extra threat, I think that absolutely makes.
It's a realistic amount of damage. You're falling in lava.
I mean, it's 100% realistic. Like you're not supposed to survive falling in lava. It's you would typically probably you're the scientist here, but I'm pretty certain if you were to fall in lava, you would probably be dead before you hit the surface.
So the one thing that games get wrong about lava is it's actually very dense. It's rock, right? So you never really go into lava. You land on top. It's more like landing on a stovetop. But the stuff's hot and sticky, so you're gonna have a hard time getting away from it once you're on top of it. Think about like it's more like a. Have you ever gotten like you're cooking a marshmallow over a fire, and have you ever touched it when it's like a marshmallow when it's on fire?
Yeah,
it's got it like it's like napalm. It's stuck to your hands.
It's just molten. Yeah, it's just molten stuck to you. Yeah, it's awful. It's oh my god. If you've ever seen, I know you probably have, but like if anyone who's watching, if you've ever seen footage of scientists going and collecting samples from lava flows, they're obviously wearing all this protective gear, and every step they take, their shoes just burst into flames. Like there's just fire as they're walking because that's how insanely hot lava is. But yeah, that's like a super cool starting point. We've got our platform, so we're definitely kind of going with this kind of fire route and the fire, some fire elemental type creatures.
Cool.
Now, is this going to be
we do still need an objective.
Yeah.
We need an objective. What is the actual goal of this encounter? Absolutely.
So I think the objective actually is going to probably inform a lot of where it actually is. If it is in a lava river, is it in like more of a structure that has lava as part of its, like almost like a temple that's rock and lava for Earth? Because if it's a fire elemental, it's not restricted by those things, right? So you could go
definitely
more extreme.
Fire elementals completely immune to fire.
And that's why I brought up the objective before we got any further, is like if the objective is something intrinsic to the elemental, like we're extracting a magical essence, then it may be that you need to kill the elemental and rip its heart out. But if the elemental is like a temple guardian or something like that, then the objective might be just to get past the elemental, or maybe even to sneak past the elemental.
Yeah, I mean, that's just it. Like, it's it does not necessarily have to be a case of you have to fight this thing. That never has to be the objective in D&D. So let's kind of have a think about it. So, like, what scenario would result in the characters actively being on floating rocks flowing through a lava stream?
Okay, when you say floating, I normally think of like magnetic levitation and stuff like that. Do you mean like there's lava all around it and it's a piece of non-melted rock
I feel
Okay.
like that's what makes the most sense, unless there's a
that's
specific
what makes
reason
sense.
it's something else.
Yeah.
So
We'll leave the magnetics out of it.
So some of
Yeah.
the suggestion is to stop an eruption. Something very.
Ooh, nice! I like
one.
that. It's
You
like
get
a
extra
virtual
credit.
natural disaster. Yeah, absolutely. Ripclaw 1980. Well done. That's a great idea. Okay, so that is the ultimate goal. And because this is D&D, the actual practicality of that, because let's face it, in the real world, we can't stop eruptions. If they're going to happen, they're going to happen. But we are in a world of magic. So, like, what we need now to kind of come up with, like, what is the method of which you prevent an eruption from happening?
I think there's a portal to the elemental plane of fire.
Yeah, I was thinking something similar.
We have a MacGuffin that we need to get to the portal. We have a portal closer MacGuffin.
It's something I've used a few times before. The idea of like a rift anchor stone or something like that. That you get it in there and it will disable it. Yeah. Okay. So this particular eruption is being caused by this rift into the elemental plane of fire, basically just going haywire, and so the party's objective is to close the rift before the eruption can take place.
So this is basically the epic fantasy battle version of having a disagreement over the thermostat. Is the elemental wants the volcano to be hotter because that's where he bathes.
Absolutely, yeah. That's
and you don't want it to be hotter.
well, that is the motivation of the elemental, isn't it? The elemental is trying to stop the party members. Excuse me,
from
trying to
turning
stop
down the temperature.
Yeah, from doing what they're doing, because it's actually going to make the environment less favorable for them.
Right. Yeah.
A volcano plug, Fergus. Jesus. Plug the volcano.
That's very Looney Tunes.
I can say with absolute certainty, Fergus, that would be a terrible idea. If you plugged an erupting volcano, you're more than likely going to cause a much more violent eruption. That's hilarious, though. I do like it. Did we get a...
So in this kind of context, the elemental having a bunch of like, what are they called? Cinder mephits, I think is what they're called.
Yeah,
mephits.
Yes, fire mephits.
Yeah,
magma mephits.
Magma mephits.
Yes, magma mephits. Magma mephits. They're great fun because, like, they're only CR1 half, so you could throw quite a few of them at a 10th level party, and for the most part, they'd be able to deal with it quite easily.
Oh, no, there's something else. There's like Cinder Childs, I think. They showed up in the Tribor encounter. They're hanging out with fire giants. I think they're. I can look this up, but yeah, there's another thing that's more powerful than the fire methods. But they're more like CR3.
There's also those like fire newt things, but those are really low. Those are like creature rating 1/4 or something.
Mm-hmm. So the thing that I liked about the Cinder Child is that they weren't terribly they weren't terribly threatening when you're just fighting them, but they explode pretty badly. They have like an AoE fire explosion when they die. And
Oh,
so
nice.
after a while, you really start wondering, maybe I should just let this thing continue attacking me or doing whatever, because killing them is actually worse than their like ongoing attack damage.
I feel that so much as someone who played Pathfinder for 3 years, and there was so many creatures that just explode when they die. It's just like, oh, why does this keep happening? We keep beating the enemy and then dying because the freaking martyrdom us at the end.
What's the size of this area that the encounter is taking place in?
Well, this is it, because it's a...
It would need to be big.
Yeah, if we're like talking caldera of a volcano, I like the grid. Like caldera of the volcano kind of style, you definitely want something that's pretty large. And then you're also going to want to have multiple moving platforms on there. So like another part of the challenge of the encounter is the party having to like coordinate by getting 2 particular platforms to do what they need to do.
That's about 100 long, so probably double that.
Oh, Tomcat's suggesting an Azure.
Okay, what are Azures?
So Azures are they are these. I'm trying to work out the way to describe them. They're sort of like fire dwarves. They're CR2, so they're a bit more hearty than your methods. But they basically look like extremely muscular dwarves with fire in place of hair. They look particularly, they are kind of very crazy looking things. They are fun. I don't know. The thing is, they're lawful neutral. I feel like this is a very chaotic encounter. What else have we?
Is there a chance that I could share my screen? Did that work?
I don't think. I don't think it would work very well with the stream.
Well, Sarah, you could look this up if you want. The thing I was talking about is called a magmin. M-A-G-M-I-N. Magmin. M-A-G-M-I-N.
I know those guys.
Yeah.
They're also CR a half, like the methods.
Oh, okay. Well, their death burst is 2d6 AoE.
Yeah, but actually, that's a really cool thing. Is even though they're CR a half, having that AoE fire burst would be super cool.
They're really obnoxious fire babies.
Absolutely, they are. Yeah, I just quite like that. So, so we know that the kind of main threat's going to be the fire elementals. The challenge is to try and close down this rift into the plane of fire. I would suggest one thing that I kind of like to do is have a thing where it's like when you have like really low CR monsters facing parties that are much higher level, is that every like round on like initiative 20 or initiative 0 or whatever comes up. A random number of them just kind of spawn in. Yeah. Until the challenge is completed.
And you have them, what you do is you have them act as a group, and you have them hit like half of the party. So you'd say, okay, I'm going to do the Magman's actions now, and you'd say, Orbis, you get attacked by 3 of these guys, and they light your hair on fire, and one of them runs off with your bag of holding, or something obnoxious like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you take 13 damage, and you might need to make like a spell concentration check or something like that, right? And Oak, you're shape shifted right now, so they don't do a lot of damage to you, but there's one other thing. So basically, you're narrating that there's this irritation going on, and so it kind of brings to mind like that there's an incentive to do something other than just let's focus damage exclusively on the main objective. It adds a little bit more dynamics and flavor to the environment.
Yes, absolutely.
I would also say that this is the perfect opportunity for essentially layer actions. I think you want to have a deep connection between the elemental state,
yes,
and the environment. And I would actually pre-script that ahead of time, probably by hit points. So I'd have a hit point scale, like that, and maybe have like 3 events that are pretty drastic changes. Like maybe the 1/3 hit point one actually starts removing half of all of the platforms at random, and so you just start rolling for which platforms suddenly start to crumble, and so you don't know ahead of time who might suddenly lose their footing as the platforms crumble into the lava, right? So it really amps up the danger, and so then you get this effect where as the creature's hit points are going down, even if they're winning by a large margin, the threat on the party ramps up just because the environment gets increasingly hostile. At 2/3, you could have like poisonous gases, maybe, as a big hazard in volcanoes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other environmental changes.
So when we're kind of like talking about like scaling, so we've got with the actual fire elementals, which kind of pose the main threat outside of the magmins, who are more of a nuisance, and their main danger is their death burst. How many elementals are we thinking here? Because my initial thought was to do something like 3, because it's a CR5, but then if we've got the magmins in as an additional thing, maybe less than that. I don't know. What would you think for?
My brain had kind of switched over to picturing one gigantic fire elemental. I think the fact that you were saying fire elementals were like challenge rating 5, I would just find a bigger.
I tell you what, we could,
or just add up a bigger thing.
We can 100% do that. Yeah, absolutely. We can 100% do that. So
just call it a volcano elemental.
So we're going, so fire, we're doing a fire elemental, but we're going to beef it up nicely. So we want to rack up
rating 12.
Challenge rating 12, cool, we'll do with that. And so fire elementals are typically large. Let's make this one huge.
Yeah, exactly.
And
well, now we've gotten into designing a monster. But largely, I would just take the existing thing and just beef up its stats, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we...
It doesn't need to be totally original. I would just scale it up.
No, definitely not. It's... So let's have a look at these and just find a... Wow, does the monster manual really not have any
Yeah, I kind of want to be able to share the screen with the fire elemental on it.
There's some cool.
Is there a specific one you want to show?
Yeah, I guess just because there's a page on elementals, and so then there's the fire elemental, and that's, yeah, challenge rating 5. So is there like a greater elemental or something like that? No? Then it goes straight into drow. That's a little disappointing. I think I must be thinking of like Palladium or one of the other systems that I've played. I haven't always been a D&D person. I really was impressed by 5th edition, but I've been playing a lot of other game systems most of my life.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to fire elementals with 5e, I don't think there's a whole lot of variety.
Yeah, really, 5e, it is literally just.
There's a picture of the fire elemental.
The fire elemental.
The fire elemental, but it's cool. We can make this work. So
an Infriti, be a genie.
The Infriti, which are the genie, yeah, the
fire giant elemental.
Yeah, but no, it's fun. Like it's quite easy to just take a monster and then ramp up its thing, like its threat level. So,
right,
just like you can literally just increase its CR, some of its ability scores, and then the amount of damage it does, and that's pretty much. And then maybe its armor class a bit as well.
Actually,
but yeah, that's pretty easy to do.
You could take one of these little Magnum guys and amp them up, like a Magnum that got a hold.
You want to start. You want to start close as you can. So honestly, something like an adult dragon might be a little bit, a red dragon might be a bit closer to start from, because we might want, layer actions and things like that. So cool. the fire elemental, if we're starting there, it's got fire form, which basically says that it can move into someone else's space, and it starts doing 1d10 fire damage to them while it's basically standing on top of them. And then every time that people attack it does fire damage to them because you're touching fire. It's susceptible to water. It casts light. It has 2 attacks instead of 1. But yeah, it's really not that impressive. So so this volcano elemental that I'm imagining is more like 4 attacks, 1 legendary action, probably a legendary resistance, or maybe 2 legendary resistances, a layer action. It's got, it's basically a lot more like a dragon, or like an adult dragon, than it would be like this little CR5 stat block here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
I would say with the red dragon is probably an adult red dragon is a good way to go.
Nice. Well, let's have a look at. So I've kind of just done a real basic beefing up, but we can add all the legendary stuff in after as well, to kind of give this a really good stat block. But by ramping up its hit dice and its con and its size, the greater fire elemental seems to be currently sitting at about 189 hit points, which is pretty hearty when you consider its resistance to like all non-magic and immune to fire and poison.
Right. Yeah.
So it's
Yeah, it also has a lot of conditional immunities that, for example, a dragon wouldn't be immune to. So it's immune to exhaustion, grappled, paralyzed, petrified, poisoned, prone, restrained, and unconscious. Those are big ones, because if you think about how you would go about tackling a dragon, we just did this. We grappled it, we tried to paralyze it, we tried to restrain it, and then at the end we cast sleep on it to try and put it unconscious. So it would be literally immune to all of the things that we tried to do to a dragon. So that's a big difference too. Yeah. Anyways, I don't want to spend all of our time just focusing on the kind of build a monster thing.
No, definitely not. That's why I just wanted to kind of like quickly do something with that so that we had a kind of base point of where to go. So I think let's talk like lair actions in particular, because that's something that's really going to affect the encounter. So I think every lair actions typically happen on initiative 20. And I think in the beginning, the lair action itself might just be the summoning of more magmins. And that's the kind of like the base level one. And then as you start to whittle down the hit points on this thing, that's when more crazy stuff starts happening as well.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so what are the purpose of lair actions in your view?
It is an additional threat within the caused by not just the monster, but the environment in which they inhabit.
Do lair actions ever affect only one player character?
They certainly can. There are cases where a lair action will like the creature will drop rocks from the ceiling, like they cause a tremor which drops things from the ceiling to hit specific players. There's certainly cases where you can have it target specific people.
And there's
even if you could
shoot out of the wall and grab someone, right?
Yeah, there's stuff like that as well. So what are you thinking in regards to like targeting a specific player?
Well, I mean, the obvious one is small eruptions, right? You have this lake of lava, and so you might have something kind of erupt out of the ground, small scale explosions and things like that. I think poisonous gases are a really good idea. I know I'm kind of on this Avatar Last Airbender kick lately, but there's this point where Roku is fighting a volcano, and there's suddenly this like blast of poisonous gas that just hits him right in the face. That was really what does him in. And that's something that volcanoes do, and so they can be targeted, I suppose. They're very localized phenomena.
Cool. So I think I definitely like this. So maybe starting. Okay, so I think maybe the magmins are their own thing then, and the first set of lair actions that are going to happen are going to be these small eruptions, where particular parts, the fire elementals, the fire elemental will cause small spouts of lava to kind of splash up on particular characters. Then the second tier, once you get it down to about 2/3 of its hit points, that's where the poison gases start coming into play.
Yeah.
And then the final tier is when the battlefield itself, the rock that they're standing on, begins to break down, and the terrain starts to become smaller.
And I just realized this. I did this kind of unintentionally. If you have people in your party who are resistant or immune to fire damage, having poison and like rock slides and stuff like that is really going to help mix things up a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's okay. Wonderful.
Are there any player races that can be immune to fire damage?
I don't know if there are any that can be immune. I think there are definitely resistant. There are many that are resistant, but
because Genasi are not immune, right?
Genasi are not immune. No, I think they are just resistant to the elements that they have. But
I played an air Genasi, but I'm not sure you can be immune to air.
no, that would be really kind of unfortunate. So fire Genasi, just to confirm, have resistance to fire.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so we've got 3 tiers of layer actions. Tier 1 is the eruptions.
Great.
So spurts of lava come up from the magma pool and target up to, we say, 3 characters. That seems kind of like a standard, I guess, for most things. It's usually like up to 3 people or something like that. So up to 3 creatures. Those creatures must succeed on a arbitrary DC dexterity save.
Sure.
Or take so and so fire damage.
So while you're typing this out, I just want to explain something I realized. So we're kind of talking about how the encounter with the volcano elemental is cool, but that's really about how the NPCs are cool. And it is true that the quality of a hero can be judged by the quality of the villain, but for aspiring GMs, I do want to point out that one GM trap is to love your NPCs more than you love the player characters. So one of the things we want to think about here is also what are the opportunities for awesomeness that we're building into the encounter for the player characters. So in addition to things that the volcano elemental can do to the player characters, we want to think about what are some weaknesses that we can build in, what are some kind of opportunities that we can place, some buttons in there where it'll be particularly satisfying if people discover, this is unstable, or I just realized they're vulnerable to this. So one of the great things about having villains where the lieutenants are not really that loyal, or where there's squabbling amongst the ranks, because then you can have social characters which exploit those cracks in the hierarchy. Unfortunately, with elementals, you really lose out on a lot of that, other than just lack of coordination with like the magmans, running forward and exploding. But even there, fire elemental's immune to fire damage, so
yeah. Well, so you saying that, how about if a character were to target the magma pool itself with something that deals cold damage, it could create like a temporary platform that they can then use to travel between the actual more stable platforms?
So you can make a note of that. But that's really, that's really more of just a mechanics note. I'm more of thinking, is there anything in the environment that is itself sort of unstable in that it creates an opportunity? So,
I
like,
think
if there was a gunpowder store or a water reservoir or um, or maybe like trapped prisoners or um, a mage that had been betrayed by the fire elemental and could be let out, or an unstable cult. Basically, if there was a third faction or a third physical element which did not interact well with the fire elemental, but was not specifically aligned with the party either, right? Not an ally, but definitely not an ally of the fire elemental either. So then if you recognize that opportunity, you can start thinking, is there a way we can use this to our advantage? Right?
I get I think I get what you're saying. So I had
Third party.
in my last game that I ran for my Tyranny campaigns, the party were facing off against a bullet, realized that they weren't really, like, they were going to lose this fight if they kept fighting it in a normal way. And so all of the party members took off on horseback and went in different directions. And as one party member lured the bullet in another direction, the other ones kind of attacked it at range from behind. And so kind of giving them the opportunity to do that. My general philosophy when it comes to stuff like that is more that the players will find crazy shit like that to do anyway, and just kind of reward it in the moment. But there is definitely something that we could do, is to think of what would actually be down there, considering the parameters of what we've given already. So that there's the portal to the elemental plane of fire, the fire elemental wanting that portal to remain unstable as it's creating a much more hospitable environment for it, but obviously is causing the volcano itself to erupt, which would be quite devastating to anyone who is nearby.
So how did the rift get there? Like, does the elemental actually have the ability to make rifts? And if so, why didn't this happen 100 years ago?
I don't think the elemental itself has the ability to make the rifts, but elemental rifts typically are... Well, elemental rifts, in fact, all rifts, rifts to any of the planes, quite often will just happen naturally. Like, they're very naturally occurring. Particularly the elemental ones, they are very naturally occurring, because if you have, like, the inside of a volcano, there's a good chance there's a rift to the elemental plane of fire. Normally... I've been watching some videos on, like, Planar Travel recently in Dungeons and Dragons. Normally, those of us who are native to the material plane cannot see the rift. We can't see them. They're everywhere, but we don't actually see them because of our connection to the material plane. But creatures that come from other planes would be able to see them. And so the fact that this rift has become so unstable to the point that material plane natives are able to see it, that would be the more concern. So I think the fact that the rift is there is of itself just a naturally occurring thing, but something has happened to cause this one to become unstable. So
maybe I've misunderstood the Horizon Walker subclass then. That seems to make it a lot cooler than I thought it was.
Yeah, the rifts to other planes are kind of just all over the place in D&D. You just never see them because we don't actually have...
That's one of those character classes that's very dependent on the GM. Right?
It's super rich. Yeah, the Horizon Walker class is super dependent. In one of the campaigns I'm playing in, we have a Horizon Walker Ranger, and it's been kind of really cool because the story that we're telling is centered around creatures coming from other planes. So his ability to detect planar rifts has kind of become very valuable to us in that we know when to expect something bad, because he'll be able to detect the rift before we see it.
Okay.
That's cool.
But
So
yeah.
let's see if we can wrap this up into a conclusion. So if we have a naturally forming rift, would that attract anyone else or anything else? Because I think we do need a third party element.
I'm all for a third party element in this. So just thinking, like, who would it be? Who would?
Because elemental cultists is definitely an option. See, I was originally thinking that maybe the elemental had basically gotten, a mage or something to open up the rift, and that they were still trapped down here, basically being held captive.
I think if you have
as an option,
if you have a creature that has been trapped in the material plane that is looking for a way home.
Oh.
One that perhaps is not allowed to go home.
You saying that, and I just had a thought as well. With the introduction of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, we have a new warlock, which is the warlock of the genie, and their patrons are different subclasses of genie. What if there is a warlock trapped on the other side who is being held prison by their Infriti patron?
Mm-hmm.
The actual opening of this rift is their kind of desperate attempt to escape.
Oh, I like it. Okay.
All right, so we've
Cool.
got.
I like that.
Kind of
There's a kind of third party element, right? They're not your ally, they're not your enemy, but there's another person here involved, and so maybe they've just come through the rift then, or they're in the process of coming through the rift, but there's a big fire elemental in the way.
Absolutely.
And that person could end up being an ally or a foe to the party, depending on how they.
Absolutely, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
How the interaction goes when they come through. So we have the warlock with an Infriti patron who is trapped on the elemental plane of fire and is trying to break through.
Yeah, and I'd give them, instead of like a silver cord, I'd give them like a burning iron chain that's attached to them that's going through the portal, so you have this really obvious visual cue that they are enslaved in some way.
Yes.
Because you really want these obvious visuals in order to communicate things when you're coming in this quite literally heated combat situation. And also the way that you communicate things visually will get a sort of a sympathy, antagonism, knee-jerk reaction from the party very quickly. So you may, if you want to communicate things in a kind of morally ambiguous way, you may also want to have them decorated with nefarious-looking attire, but then the chains. Usually, if you put people in chains, you get a sympathetic response, but just giving people pointy hats.
Absolutely, yeah.
Makes the party suspicious, I've noticed. And apparently no one likes spiders. I don't know.
I know they are nature's housekeepers. Okay, so all right, awesome. So I think that's pretty much a really solid encounter. So we have our floating inside the caldera of a volcano. We have our floating platforms, which are constantly moving around. there is a destabilized portal to the elemental plane of fire, which is being protected by a very hyped up and powerful fire elemental. Every now and then, some magmins kind of just pop out of the magma pool and start causing trouble for the party because they are mischievous little creatures and are also just quite favorable of this destabilized portal. The portal has been destabilized by a warlock who is being held prisoner by their Infriti patron on the elemental plane of fire, and they are desperately trying to get make their way back through to the material plane. And a series, whilst all this fighting is going on, the party have a sort of rift stone which is going to seal the portal that they have to activate and throw it. They have to be able to activate and get in there. I imagine we'll put like a skill check kind of attached to that, or an ability check attached to that, so there's actually a challenge there. And
constantly threaten dropping the MacGuffin that they think is super critical into the lava.
Like that's a serious risk as well. And the magmins in particular,
like actually do it because to the player characters this is the end of the world. But as the GM, you know, the warlock is also capable of shutting the portal. See, having contingency plans is really nice.
Absolutely, yeah. The warlock, once they come through, is capable of closing that portal down. And then we have a series of lair actions that keep taking place because of just the chaos of the environment, starting off with just some simple spurts of lava coming out and hitting the players, then clouds of toxic gas coming out of the magma itself and caused by the fire elemental, and finally the platform of rock that they are all standing on, the different platforms, begin to break away from the intense heat and the chaos of battle and start dropping away into the magma, making the surface area that they have to fight on smaller and smaller as they go. That's an insane encounter, and I think that's freaking great. Like, that's absolutely.
You know what's going to happen is hopefully someone's going to start casting flight on some of the party members, because otherwise.
Yeah, and that is something I was thinking. Is obviously like this is a level where fly is a perfectly acceptable spell to have access to.
Mm-hmm. You're going to want it.
Yeah, you're definitely going to want it in this fight. I really love this kind of battle map that you've got there, Sarah. I can see that just like the super cool. I love the rift, and then having these kind of different floating platforms there. It's really nice. I think like if when we test play this and run this, we're going to have to create all the different elements of it in Roll20 so that we can move the platforms around and that.
Yeah, I figured that's why I just put all these black spots on a separate layer so I can separate them out as tokens. So
yeah, 100%.
This is incredibly metal.
It is super metal, and I absolutely freaking love it. And I think with that, Tom Gat's saying, I really want to play this. I think we're definitely going to be test playing this, and we're going to run it. So keep an eye out. For those of you who are watching, if you are not familiar with what you are watching, this is Wayfarers League. You can find us at wayfarersleague.com and join our community there. We are constantly running new games and one-shots and campaigns in Dungeons and Dragons and other tabletop RPGs. So please get involved if you're not already. If you want to play this encounter, that's where it will be advertised at wayfarersleague.com. For those of you who were not here at the beginning as well, we are currently at 70, I think it says 73, but I think we're still at 72 followers.
No, we got a new follower during the stream.
Oh, nice. So we're currently at 73 followers. And we are aiming at the moment to get to 100 followers. If we can reach 100 followers, we will be releasing a special one-off episode of this series, Homebrew Labs, where we're going to create something super cool and really excited about that episode. So if you are not currently a follower on our Twitch channel, please click that follow button. And if you are already a follower, please share this with your friends and anyone you think might be interested in it, because if we can get to that goal, we're going to have a lot of fun with that, and you guys are going to love it. But otherwise, I think that is a great place for us to kind of sign off. We will, as usual, test play these, kind of edit them and flesh them out, and we'll be releasing these in publication on our website, hopefully in the next few months.
Yeah.
And those will be available for purchase there. But otherwise, Josiah, thank you so much for joining us this time. This was really great. We look forward on having you on for another episode again in the future. This is our season finale, but do not worry. In 2 weeks, we will be back. But we will be going back to our first, what we did in our first episode, and we will be creating a brand new monster once again for 5th edition and Dungeons and Dragons. Sarah, again, just fantastic with this. You always just blow me away whenever we do these.
Thank you.
It's absolutely fantastic. But everyone else, thanks for watching and have a good evening.
Good night, guys.